Beef. I got lots of it. Mitch McConnell looks like trimmed chicken fat. Ted Cruz catches dirt and car engines with his face. And Charlie Kirk looks like batter poured into an unplugged griddle. But throw a little green vegetable in there and you've got today's poor choice. Beef and broccoli. Made at home and just as good, if not better than the Chinese takeout kind. Comes together in like 20 minutes, so it's a great weeknight meal and it's carb friendly. Starting out, a little prep work. I'm cutting up, I'd say, about a pound of broccolini. It was on sale today, believe it or not, so I scooped it up because normally broccolini can be on the pricier side. Regular broccoli is totally fine here too, but I like broccolini because it tends to be more tender to me. So I'm just cutting it up, including the stems up to about an inch or so from the bottom. I'll discard those. And if you're using broccoli, just cut off the florets. Or you could buy a bag of already cut up broccoli. I ain't gonna give you a hard time about it this time. I'm also cutting up half a red onion into slices. White onions are totally fine here too. And this being your beef and broccoli, if you wanted to, you could throw in some mushrooms, maybe a red bell pepper. It's totally up to you. I've seen it all when I've ordered from restaurants, so there's no limit. Next, I'll grate up about 1 to 2 tablespoons of ginger, fresh ginger by the way. When grating, you don't actually need to peel off the skin since the microplane I'm using will break it all down. Just FYI for those of you who are ready to break out that spoon. And I've also minced up 1 to 2 tablespoons of fresh garlic. Now it's time for our sauce, which is pretty simple. We'll do 2 teaspoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, 3 tablespoons of oyster sauce, and 2 tablespoons of shao-hsing cooking wine. You can sub with dry sherry, but you could just also pop over to Amazon and get you a bottle of this stuff. It's really worth having around. Save that sherry for your belly. Give that a mix, and that is our sauce. Now let's address our meat. I've got 1 pound of flank steak here. We're going to first cut off any excess fat that you see here. There were a few pieces on here that I just gave a quick trim to. Then we're going to just cut long strips going down the grain. See how the pattern here is going down? So I'm going to cut this piece into 3 strips and then at an angle with my knife, a la on a bias, I'm going to cut pretty thin slices against the grain. Going against the grain here will help in having a more tender bite. I'd say these slices were about an 1/8 inch thick maybe. Just think of the thickness you'd normally see when you order beef and broccoli from Chinese restaurants. We want that. Next is a very important step in the process of tenderizing our meat called velveting. It's what makes the beef and broccoli as tender and not chewy like most beef can be. So first we need to get our beef in some water or under the sink and give it some rough squeezing and massaging. As someone asked in a video before where I did this for chicken, no, this is not for the sake of washing off dirt or whatever. This is actually important to the process as it helps with breaking down the proteins. I'm demonstrating this in a bowl of water for you here, but this is really much easier under running water in the sink, FYI. So you've massaged your meat. Now we need to marinate it for a bit. So get it into a bowl and we'll add together 1 teaspoon of soy sauce, 1 teaspoon of shao-hsing cooking wine, 2 teaspoons of sesame oil, half a teaspoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of baking soda, which is really important in this velveting process, and 1 teaspoon of cornstarch. Give all that a lovely mixing and make sure no little nooks and crannies of powder or whatever exists. Really get in there and then we'll let it hang out for like 15 minutes or so. Last thing we need is a little cornstarch slurry for the end to help thicken up the sauce in our wok once it all comes together. So I've got 1 teaspoon of cornstarch with like 2 tablespoons of water. Mix this up in a separate small bowl and reserve it for later. You might have to stir it up one more time right before you add it in, just in case too much time has passed between making it and kneading it. So now we can get to woking. So I've got my wok over high heat. Cast iron is totally fine here too, and I'm going down with some safflower oil. Peanut oil is fine too, or any high smoke point oil. Also, make sure your stove exhaust is on too, because it's going to get smoky. Then I'm adding in my beef, and I'm doing everything today in 2 batches because I don't want to crowd my wok and let off too much moisture, which will prevent browning. Stir the beef up pretty good every 20 seconds or so, and we're cooking this till it's almost cooked through, maybe like 90 seconds total, depending on how hot our wok is actually running. It's going to go back in later when we mix everything together, so it's fine being 80% cooked here. Do this again with a second batch of beef and then get it all set aside, obviously not back into the bowl that the raw beef was just in. Now get the wok wiped out with a wet paper towel just to get rid of some of the cooked meat left behind. We don't want that to burn up and then get mixed into our final product. Give another squeeze of oil into the wok and then throw in half the onion and broccolini mix. If things start drying out, don't be afraid to add a little bit more oil into the wok. And just an FYI, we really want to get as high of a heat as we can. So this recipe works best in a wok or cast iron as they can really take the heat and transfer it into the food. Regular nonstick pans just won't get the job done properly. So if you need an excuse for a wok or cast iron, now is the time. Trust me, I cook so much stuff in this wok and it doesn't always have to be Asian food, so it's totally worth having this. So we want to cook our broccolini and onions until they're just charred around the edges. We'll swap swap them out with the second round of vegetables. Then just as our second round of vegetables are finishing, we'll add in our ginger and garlic and vigorously stir. This stuff is minced up so it can burn easily if we let it sit too long in the hot wok. Then we'll add back in the other vegetables and the beef and give everything a nice mixing for about a minute before we add in our sauce. And we want to add our sauce around the edges of the wok so it has a chance to caramelize on that hot surface before dripping down into the meat and vegetables. Mix and then add in about a tablespoon or two of our cornstarch slurry, give that another mixing, and that is it. Beef and broccoli, serve it up however you want, with some rice, with some noodles, it is all up to you. And hey, this is Poor Choices Kitchen. We have a Patreon link down in the description. $1 a month is all we ask for. It helps pay for recipes in these here inflated times. And as I've pointed out in my previous videos for this month, I'm still in my dry January phase, but you can do that dry sherry.